Hey, what's up you guys? I'm Dr. Sharma. You may have heard of the disorders obsessive compulsive disorder as well as obsessive compulsive personality disorder. But while those two sound extremely similar, there's actually a lot of differences between the two entities. And many times they're actually mixed up because of the similarities in their names. While both of these entities may have some negative connotations, just bear in mind that every individual is unique, and the personality types, whether they're pathological or not, should not be looked at in a disrespectful manner. That being said, let's get started. OCD and OCPD. While they sound interchangeable, are they really? Obsessive compulsive disorder is just that. It's defined by urges or obsessions that occur recurrently, conjuring up in the mind of the individual when they're really not trying to think that thought or that specific urge. Compulsions are repetitive acts that the individual feels that they need to complete in response to some sort of obsession or some sort of thought. And it's according to rigid rules. It's like a ritual that the individual feels like they need to complete. Now, the really important distinction between OCD and other subclinical syndromes that may not be as pathological is the fact that it really affects the individual's life. Different aspects of that individual's life, such as the workplace, at home, socializing with friends or family, and maybe as little as something as going grocery shopping, may become extremely affected and hindered because of this disorder. There's a close relationship between OCD and anxiety disorders, and many of the times individuals can have entities of both. In addition, there are subtypes of OCD, such as excessive hair pulling or trichotillomania, excessive skin picking, excoriation disorder, hoarding disorder, which is pretty well known to be an individual holding onto items and having like a lot of possessive value over items of varying monetized value. And in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5, which is what psychologists and psychiatrists use to characterize illnesses, there are specifiers that specifically characterize whether or not the individual is aware of that they have the disorder. That is, what's the individual's insight to their disorder and how it's affecting their functioning in their life. So how can you actually diagnose somebody with obsessive compulsive disorder? It actually requires a diagnostic criteria of having either one or both an obsession or persistent thought or urge that conjures up in their mind that is extremely intrusive and affects their thinking, affects their functioning as well, or a compulsion, which is a ritualized act, the urge of having to do something repetitively, actually doing it, and it taking a lot of time out of their day and essentially affecting their functioning in different aspects of their life. An example of an obsession could be something like seeing a traffic accident occur in your mind repetitively, even though there was no past incidents of that ever occurring, which would actually be more along the lines of PTSD if there was a past incident that is making that person have those thoughts that recur, making them feel symptoms of being in that accident, whereas the obsession is sort of those thoughts just recurring on their own, and there may not be any justifiable reason or rational reason for that occurring. Or something like the urge to maybe punch somebody or stab someone that occurs persistently. And yeah, it can be really random thoughts that they may be experiencing with some sort of unjustifiable or irrational reason. A classic compulsive example is hand washing. Feeling like the individual needs to hand wash several times a day before maybe leaving the house or doing something, some sort of activity in the kitchen. Maybe sometimes rational or irrational fear that there are germs that persist on the hands even after washing their hands several times or after some sort of activity. And these thoughts and compulsive behaviors, either one, in order for the diagnosis to actually be valid, is that it has to take at least 1 hour of time per day of that individual's time and really affect their functioning in some sort of aspect. This part of the diagnosis is actually pretty important because it's the difference between something like OCD and maybe just sort of normal behavior that a lot of people exhibit on a day-to-day basis, such as going and checking your door to see if it's locked, maybe just double checking it every single day. You know, it's something that doesn't take more than an hour. It's not something that they're doing 17 times, walking to their car, coming back and checking the door if it's locked. Doing that maybe 17 times, it taking a long time to do because of the fear that they might have forgotten to lock the door or that it's not locked despite them checking it. Repetitive times, that taking a long time, that's when we start to get into the realm of diagnosing somebody with a compulsive disorder, meaning that they're doing this and it's really affecting their functioning and there's no justifiable reason for them to be doing that, other than that there is that fear and that urge in thinking that, oh my gosh, I think my door may not be locked, versus normal behavior of going and checking whether or not your door is locked 1 or 2 times. It's not taking a long amount of time of your day. Maybe it might not even occur every single day, and it especially won't take over an hour doing that, taking that much time out of your day because that will affect your functioning. These obsessions and compulsions can vary from mild to severe and can at times be incapacitating for some people. Also, there are themes of the obsessions and compulsions, like I sort of touched on, such as germs, which is characterized by the obsessive thoughts that there are maybe germs that are persistent on surfaces or their hands, and then of course the ritualized act of either cleaning surfaces with a solution for a long period of time or washing their hands multiple times. Other themes include forbidden and sort of taboo thoughts, such as aggressive thoughts of getting in a fight with somebody or that urge to stab someone. And other themes include sexual thoughts or sexual sort of realm of thoughts or behaviors, such as repetitive thoughts or images of a specific sex conjuring in the individual's mind that are sort of unwanted and affecting their functioning. There are many proposed risks for developing OCD, which range between environmental and childhood experiences, an example including some stressful or traumatic event in the past, and there may even be a genetic predispositioning to developing a certain psychiatric disorder, and specifically with OCD, which does have a link to genetic predisposition. There are unfortunately many consequences of bearing the diagnosis of OCD in terms of changes in function. It can significantly decrease someone's quality of life, especially with familial relationships, because an obsession with maybe harming a family member or an obsession or compulsion around germs or surfaces may cause that individual to socially isolate and not want to meet people such as friends or family members, which definitely affects functioning and development, especially early on in childhood. This can also extend to the workplace, the individual socially isolating themselves in the workplace itself, and that can lead to a severe underperformance in that patient's job, in that occupation, and may even lead to job loss. In addition, it could lead to some serious health consequences, such as an individual not wanting to take certain medications with the fear that there are germs on the surface of that medication. If the individual has the disease affecting them as early as childhood or adolescent, it can really carry into their adulthood life, making it pretty hard for that individual to live independently and on their own. It may lead to a lot of developmental difficulties that come from the individual not socializing with their peers, which is something that is extremely crucial for normal development in childhood and adolescent age moving on to adulthood. So obsessive compulsive personality disorder, while it is similar in the name, is actually quite different. These individuals don't have those intrusive thoughts that you have in obsessive compulsive disorder. There aren't these urges or thoughts that sort of conjure up in the person's mind consistently that occurs in OCD. Their functioning can actually be quite normal, and at times actually be hyper-functioning in certain settings such as the workplace, because some of the characteristics of OCPD, or obsessive compulsive personality disorder, is a strong pattern of excessive perfection. They have rigid controls on things like their career, their social life, and have to be super pragmatic, and all those aspects of life, especially the workplace, has to be exactly how they want it and how they prefer it. If anyone wants to change their schedule, or let's say change a PowerPoint that they've created, you will know about it. It will be a big deal. It can get to the point where they are condescending on others at the workplace because they're persisting on the fact that there was no reason to change that PowerPoint. They had it exactly perfect and set the way that they wanted it. And if you change one little thing, or even just parts of some sort of project that they're working on, it's a huge deal. People with OCPD, it's characterized by an excessive thoughts and sort of preoccupation with certain aspects of their life, and most commonly the workplace and projects that they're working on and scheduling. And it's to the point that sometimes they grow a detachment from others emotionally because of the persistent excessive preoccupation with that aspect of their life. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they avoid people. These individuals can absolutely have very meaningful and intimate relationships with other individuals. People with OCPD tend to be a little bit more on the rigid side in terms of political views, moralities, and ethics, and they aren't as flexible or open with things or other opinions, sometimes because of their excessive thoughts of perfectionism and having everything having to be perfect the way that they want it. Now, you may be thinking the excessive perfectionism may be affecting their life in terms of the workplace because it's taking too much time on a project because of just how nitty and gritty their detail has to be. And you're actually right. This can actually affect their functioning because they'll maybe miss deadlines on a project that were due because they're just taking too much time to try to get it perfect. That being said, there are, again, many people who are very successful who have OCPD, and sometimes they may even be more efficient because of the pragmatic manner that they may go about a certain project or their job, and otherwise may live very normal and healthy lives. Another example of OCPD as a parent would be turning playtime into sort of a harsh lesson. And an example is a mom or dad chastising a child for not playing with toys correctly, such as unsuccessfully fitting a circular or square shape into the cutout holes, or chastising a child for doing a subpar performance during a Little League game. There is that emphasis on a perfect performance that really starts to take the fun out of any sort of activity that the child is doing, and it's at the expense of warm, inviting parenting skills. There is a very high prevalence of OCPD in our population, and in studies ranges between 3 and 8%. So going back to OCD, which clearly sounds like a little bit more of a serious diagnosis, a little bit more affecting functioning overall, and does not occur as commonly in the population as OCPD, people with obsessive compulsive disorder can also live a successful life. It may not be completely normal in terms of how we see it in today's age and era, but they can still hold on to jobs. There's ways that they can cope and try to use mechanisms in order to live with those obsessions or compulsions that they may be suffering from. Classic example of a famous person is Howie Mandel from Deal or No Deal, and you'll see on the show that he'll fist bump people because he has this intense fear of germs on the surface of people's hands. And he also washes his hands multiple times a day. In fact, when he was growing up, he always thought that he was just a little bit weird and just the odd one out, and that he was just different. And it wasn't until adulthood that he was diagnosed with OCD. Those are the differences between obsessive compulsive disorder and obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Very similar in names, but can be actually very distinct. And a person can be diagnosed with both of the entities individually because of just how different they are. Hope you guys learned a lot. Let me know if you guys have any questions or are there any other topics that you'd like me to talk about. Take care.